Nia stepped into the courtroom with a calm strength that made everyone turn to look at her. The morning sun had caught the colors of her Ankara dress, and it seemed to glow as she walked. She didn't rush, she didn't stumble. She carried herself like a woman who knew exactly who she was. People in the room whispered, their eyes moving between her and Jabari, the man sitting with a wide grin on his face. He leaned back in his chair as if this was already his victory, as if she had come here to beg for mercy. His smirk carried the arrogance of a man who believed he had broken her completely. But Nia's eyes told another story. They were steady, calm, and unshaken, almost as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. The weight of betrayal, the nights of tears, the years of silence, all of it had led her here. She did not bow her head. She did not let her hands tremble. She simply walked forward with quiet grace, the soft sound of her heels echoing through the hall, reminding everyone that this was not a woman to pity. This was a woman to respect. Would you like me to keep expanding the next parts in the same flowing viral story style? No headings, just emotional narration plus natural storytelling. Around 200 to 300 words each? Jabari sat with his back against the chair, one arm hanging lazily over the side as if the whole courtroom was his stage. When the papers were placed in front of him, he picked up the pen without a second thought and chuckled under his breath. It wasn't the laugh of a man letting go of something heavy. It was the laugh of a man who thought he had won. He tilted his head toward Nia, his eyes filled with the kind of mockery only a man drunk on pride could carry. As he pressed the pen to the paper, he smirked, making sure she saw the curve of his lips, as though this was the final blow and she would crumble before him. People in the courtroom noticed. Some shook their heads in disbelief, some exchanged quiet whispers. They saw a husband who had abandoned his wife and children yet still found the audacity to laugh in her face. Jabari thought she was weak, that she had nothing left without him. He believed that by signing those papers, he was proving she had failed, that she would walk out of that room broken and forgotten. But what Jabari didn't know was that his arrogance was painting his downfall in bold colors for everyone to see. His laugh echoed through the hall, but it didn't sound like victory. It sounded hollow, forced, and cruel. The more he smirked, the more people's eyes turned toward Nia, waiting to see her reaction. Yet she sat still, her hands folded neatly, her gaze steady. She didn't flinch, didn't lower her eyes, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. Her calmness unsettled him more than he realized. He thought she was the fool in this story, but soon the truth would show who was truly laughing last. The very pen he held so carelessly, the very signature he scribbled with arrogance, would soon become the mark of his greatest humiliation. Do you want me to now expand part 3? A marriage built on lies in the same style, around 350 to 400 words, keeping it flowing like this? In the beginning, their marriage looked like something out of a dream. The city of Adawa had danced for them on their wedding day. Drums beat loudly, women sang in colorful wrappers, and everyone praised the young couple. Nia had looked at Jabari with eyes full of hope, believing she had found her partner for life. She believed his promises, the sweet words he whispered under the moon, and the way he held her hand as if he would never let go. To the outside world they were the perfect match, handsome, elegant, and deeply in love. But what glittered on the surface was nothing like what lived in the shadows. Jabari's heart was never hers alone. Even while smiling beside her in public, he was hiding secrets. He was a man who craved attention from every corner, a man who could not stay loyal. Nia discovered the late-night phone calls, the scent of another woman's perfume on his shirt, the excuses he made when he disappeared for hours. Each lie was like a knife, cutting her silently, leaving wounds no one could see. Still, Nia carried her pain in silence. She had children to raise, a home to keep, and a dignity she refused to let go of. At night, she would cry quietly into her pillow, making sure her tears never woke the little ones who slept peacefully in the next room. By day she stood tall, her smile hiding the storms raging inside her. People praised her strength without ever knowing how much it cost her to keep walking with her head held high. Jabari thought her silence meant weakness. He thought her forgiveness meant she would never leave, that she would always accept whatever betrayal he threw at her. But in reality, every silent tear was a lesson. Every time she swallowed her pain, she was gathering strength. She was learning to rise from the ashes of disappointment, building a fire inside her heart that one day would burn brighter than all his lies. Do you want me to continue with part 4? The The final betrayal in the same deep, emotional viral style around 3. The day of the final betrayal was one Nia would never forget. Jabari didn't sneak around this time. He didn't hide behind excuses or lies. He walked straight into their home with another woman by his side, her hand resting on his arm like she belonged there. His eyes were cold, his words sharp as he declared that he was done, that he was never coming back. The children stood frozen in the corner, confused by the sight of a stranger in their father's place. Nia's heart broke, but she refused to let a single tear fall in front of him. She stood tall, her face calm, though inside every part of her was screaming. Jabari mistook her silence for surrender. He believed she was too weak to fight back, too dependent on him to survive. He thought walking away with another woman would shatter her, leaving her lost and desperate. With pride in his voice, he told her she would regret losing him, that she would not last a day without his support. His arrogance filled the room like smoke choking the air. The other woman smirked too, convinced she had taken everything from Nia. But what Jabari never understood was that silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is a shield, a quiet gathering of power, a storm forming beneath the surface. Nia listened to his words, but inside her something shifted. The love she once held for him turned into a flame of determination. The tears she had cried in secret dried up that very moment, replaced by a calm strength he could not see. She realized she no longer needed him, that his absence was not the end but the beginning of her own rise. As he slammed the door and walked away with his new prize, he thought he had won. But he had only set her free. Nia's silence was not surrender. It was preparation. And the storm she was preparing would one day sweep through his life with a force he never imagined. Do you want me to now expand part 5? Her secret journey in the same flowing emotional style, around 350 to 400 words? While Jabari laughed and believed she was broken, Nia was quietly rewriting her story. Nights that he thought she spent crying, she spent studying, learning, and planning her future. She read books by the dim light of a lamp, her fingers tracing the pages as ideas took root in her mind. Every tear she had once shed turned into determination. Every insult she had endured became fuel to rise higher. Slowly, carefully, she began a small business, selling beautiful fabrics and handmade jewelry that carried the rich colors and patterns of African tradition. First it was small. She worked from her tiny apartment in Adawa, spreading word by word, piece by piece, weaving dreams into reality. She faced challenges, of course, the kind that make most people quit, but Nia had learned to see obstacles as stepping stones. Every setback only sharpened her focus. She woke before sunrise, sketched designs, negotiated with suppliers, and delivered her pieces herself, always with a smile that hid the nights of hard work behind it. She learned to wear strength like a jewel, carrying herself with pride even when the world had doubted her. Her empire began to grow quietly, like a river forming beneath the ground before it breaks the surface. People started noticing her talent, the beauty in her work, the way she brought African tradition to life in modern ways. Orders multiplied, customers praised her, and slowly, her small business became a thriving empire. Fabrics from Nia's hands adorned women across the city, and her jewelry became a symbol of elegance and culture. Through it all, she never let her pain define her. She wore her success as she wore her Ankara dresses, with grace, with power, and with pride. Jabari's laughter and mockery faded from her life like distant echoes because Nia had discovered something far greater than revenge. She had discovered herself. She had transformed betrayal into beauty, tears into strength, and silence into wealth. And she knew deep in her heart. When Nia entered the courtroom that day, every eye was on her. Not because she demanded attention, but because the room expected a scene. They expected tears, they expected sobs, they expected a woman crushed by betrayal. But Nia gave them none of that. Instead, she walked in with a quiet confidence, her Ankara dress flowing gracefully around her, the rich colors glowing under the soft light. She lifted her hands to adjust her geli, doing it with a calm elegance that made heads turn. Every movement she made was deliberate, every gesture a silent declaration. She was not broken. People began to whisper. Some thought it strange, others admired it. There was something in the way she carried herself, something powerful, magnetic, unshakable. Her hands were steady as she took her seat, her spine straight, her gaze forward. She didn't look at Jabari, she didn't flinch at his smirk, and she certainly didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her react. The courtroom, once buzzing with gossip about her weakness, now buzzed with curiosity. Who was this woman who had endured so much, yet came out shining brighter than ever? Even the children in the room looked at her differently. They felt her strength, her quiet authority, and they felt safe knowing that their mother was more than just a survivor. She was a force. Lawyers and spectators exchanged glances, realizing that Nia was not the same woman who had once sat quietly at home, hiding behind her tears. Every eye in the room was drawn to her, not for pity but for respect. Jabari noticed it too. For the first time his smirk faltered. He had expected to see fear, to see weakness, to see the woman he thought he had destroyed crumple before him. But instead he saw calm, composure, and an unshakable dignity that he could neither mock nor break. The whispers grew louder and Nia smiled faintly, knowing that the moment she had been waiting for, the moment of quiet, undeniable power, was finally here. Next I can expand Part 7T. The courtroom fell silent as the judge cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm. Everyone leaned in, waiting for the formalities to begin. Jabari, still smug from what he thought was his easy victory, let out a soft laugh. He signed the papers carelessly, glancing at Nia with that same mocking smirk, certain that the day would end exactly as he had planned. But the judge's next words began to shift the air, subtle at first, like a quiet warning before a storm. As per the submitted documents, the judge started, and Nia felt a quiet thrill deep in her chest. The words were simple, professional, yet they carried weight, the kind that could change everything in a single moment. Jabari's smirk lingered, but there was a slight twitch around his mouth, a flicker of unease he tried to hide. He didn't see the calm power in Nia's eyes, the quiet strength that had been building for years, hidden behind patience and silent determination. The judge continued, reading each line with deliberate clarity, his tone steady. The courtroom leaned closer, sensing that something unexpected was about to unfold. People shifted in their seats, whispers rising, anticipation buzzing like electricity through the air. Nia's hands remained folded in her lap, her posture perfect, but inside, her heart raced. She had waited for this moment, the moment when truth would break free of lies, when justice would arrive quietly, without shouting or anger. Jabari's laughter died slowly as the words sank in. His smug confidence faltered. He leaned forward, confused, trying to understand, but the judge's calm voice left no room for doubt. Every eye in the courtroom, every whisper, every subtle movement now focused on him. The man who had mocked, abandoned, and belittled Nia was about to realize that the game had already shifted, and that he had unknowingly signed the papers that would mark his deepest humiliation. I can now continue with Part 8, the bank balance revelation in the same viral emotiona. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. According to the documents submitted, Mrs. Nia Adair owns assets worth $4.2 million across banks and properties. The courtroom froze. Gasps filled the air, whispers rising like a sudden storm. People leaned forward, eyes wide, some covering their mouths in shock. Nia sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a quiet smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She had waited for this moment, and now it had arrived. Jabari, on the other hand, was frozen in disbelief. The pen he had been holding so carelessly slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the floor. His eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The smirk that had filled his face with arrogance for years vanished completely, replaced by shock, confusion, and panic. He had thought he was walking into a simple divorce, a victory he could boast about for months. But now, every second in that courtroom reminded him that he had been outsmarted in a way he could never have imagined. The crowd's energy shifted instantly. Women whispered excitedly, some nodding at Nia with admiration, while men shook their heads at Jabari's sudden fall from confidence. The children in the back of the room looked at their mother with wide eyes, realizing for the first time the depth of her strength and independence. Nia had carried this secret quietly for years, building her empire silently while he had laughed and mocked her. And now it was all revealed in one moment, leaving him exposed, powerless, and small. Jabari tried to speak, to deny it, to stammer some excuse, but the truth was already written in ink, documented and undeniable. Every eye in the courtroom was on him now, waiting for his next move, but there would be none. The very woman he had thought he could humiliate had turned the tables completely, showing the world, and him, that strength, dignity, and perseverance always win in the end. I can continue with part 9. His shock? Jabari couldn't move. He turned slowly toward Nia, his eyes wide, disbelief written all over his face. Sweat had formed on his forehead, and his hands trembled slightly, the pen forgotten on the floor. The woman he had mocked, abandoned, and belittled for years now stood taller than him in every way. Not just in wealth but in spirit, in strength, in the quiet dignity he had always underestimated. Every laugh he had thrown at her, every insult he had spat, now seemed empty, meaningless, and foolish. Nia sat with perfect composure, her eyes calm, her posture straight, and her lips curved in a small, serene smile. She didn't gloat, didn't sneer, didn't mock him back. She simply exuded power, the kind that comes from years of silent struggle, of rising from betrayal, of turning pain into purpose. Jabari's chest tightened as he realized that the woman he thought he had crushed had become unstoppable, unshakable, and untouchable. His arrogance had blinded him, and now the world, and she, showed him exactly what he had lost. The courtroom had gone silent, all attention on the drama unfolding. Every eye watched the man who had once laughed at her struggle now shrink before the truth. Even the whispers that had buzzed moments ago seemed to die down, as if everyone knew this moment was more than just a legal procedure. It was a reckoning. Jabari's mind raced. How had she done it? How had she built this empire, this life, this power right under his nose? He had thought he was the one in control, but in reality, he had been nothing more than a spectator to her rise. For Nia, the moment was quiet victory. She didn't need to yell, she didn't need to throw his arrogance back at him. Her presence, her calm, her wealth, and her dignity were enough to show him, and everyone in that room, that she was stronger, wiser, and far more powerful than he could ever imagine. His laughter, once sharp and cruel, had died completely. Now only silence spoke. Next, I can expand part 10 flashback. As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, Nia felt a strange calm wash over her. Memories she had tried to bury for years began to surface. Nights when Jabari had shouted at her. Nights when his insults had cut deeper than any weapon. She remembered the times he told her she would never make it on her own, that she was too weak, too small, too ordinary to survive without him. She remembered the sneers, the rolling eyes, the careless words thrown like stones, all meant to break her spirit. For a moment the old pain flickered, but it was different now. Instead of making her tremble or cry, each memory fueled her sense of triumph. She saw the little apartment where she had worked late into the night while he mocked her. She saw the designs, the jewelry, the fabrics she had painstakingly turned into a successful empire. She remembered every silent tear, every moment she had swallowed her anger and hurt, turning it instead into fuel to rise higher. The courtroom was silent, but in her mind, the flashbacks played vividly, showing her the contrast between the woman she had been and the woman she had become. The girl who once doubted herself now sat unshaken. The woman who had been belittled now stronger than the man who had tried to destroy her. Every insult Jabari had hurled, every sneer he had thrown, every night of pain, it had all led to this moment. They had built her resilience, her cunning, her strength, and her empire. She looked at him then, and for the first time, truly saw the smallness of his arrogance. He had thought he could humiliate her, but all he had done was sharpen her power. The courtroom, the crowd, the whispers, they were witnesses not to his victory, but to her rise. And for Nia, each flashback was no longer a memory of shame. It was a reminder of how far she had come and how unstoppable she had become. I can continue with part 11. The crowd's reaction in the same emotional viral style, around 350 words. Should I go ahead? Whispers rippled through the courtroom like wildfire, bouncing off the walls and filling every corner with astonishment. People couldn't stop talking, their voices low but urgent, carrying shock, admiration, and disbelief all at once. Women leaned toward each other, smiles spreading across their faces, eyes shining with pride. They had seen betrayal, they had seen pain, but here was a woman who had turned every insult, every heartbreak, every lonely night into power and triumph. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and it inspired everyone watching. The men in the courtroom reacted differently. Many shook their heads, some with disbelief, others with quiet shame. They had underestimated Nia, assumed that a woman who had been mocked, abandoned, and belittled could never rise so high. Jabari, once so sure of his superiority, now looked small, swallowed by his own arrogance. Every head turned toward him as the truth settled in. He had misjudged the strength, courage, and resilience of the woman sitting across from him. The energy in the room shifted. People who had expected a simple divorce hearing now realized they were witnessing something far more powerful. A reckoning, a display of dignity, and the unstoppable force of a woman who refused to be broken. Children peered at Nia with wide eyes, learning in that instant what true strength looked like. Lawyers and spectators whispered, nodding at each other, amazed by the quiet power she carried. And through it all, Nia remained calm, poised, and dignified. She didn't clap or shout, she didn't gloat or point. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. Every glance, every whisper, every turn of the head in that courtroom confirmed what she already knew. She had risen above the hurt, the lies, and the betrayal. She had become a living testament to resilience, a reminder that a woman's strength is not measured by her tears, but by how she rebuilds herself when the world expects her to break. Next, I can expand. Jabari's face twisted in desperation, his confident mask finally slipping. He opened his mouth, stammering, searching for some way to deny the truth. There must be a mistake, this can't be right, he mumbled, his voice shaking as sweat rolled down his temples. He glanced at the judge, hoping for a lifeline, a chance to fix what he thought was just a simple divorce. But the judge only adjusted his glasses slowly, his calm expression showing no hint of mercy, and repeated the facts with quiet authority. There was no mistake. The documents were clear, accurate, and undeniable. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Jabari's panic grew. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by fear and confusion. Every second, the weight of reality sank deeper. He had underestimated the very woman he had abandoned and ridiculed. The man who had laughed while signing divorce papers now realized he had lost everything. The wealth he assumed she lacked, the dignity he thought he had stripped from her, and the respect he believed was forever in his grasp. People around him couldn't help but notice the shift. Women in the gallery smiled softly, a quiet pride in their eyes. Men shook their heads, some in shame, some in awe of Nia's rise. Even the children felt the tension, sensing their mother's victory without needing to understand all the details. Nia remained calm, her face serene, her hands still folded. She didn't mock him, didn't speak. Her victory was in her presence, her composure, the unspoken truth that she had always been stronger than he ever imagined. Jabari's desperation grew, his lips moving without sound, searching for excuses that didn't exist. Every glance at Nia reminded him of his misjudgment. He had thought she was weak, that she would crumble, that her life would fall apart without him. But all those assumptions had been his undoing. He had left her thinking he had won. And now, sitting there with the courtroom watching, he realized that she had won far more. Nia didn't need to say a word. She didn't clap, she didn't smirk, she didn't turn to look at Jabari. Her silence was louder than any insult she could throw back, louder than any taunt or revenge. Every eye in the courtroom was on her, and without speaking, she told the world everything she needed them to know. She had endured, she had suffered, and now she had risen. Her victory wasn't measured in dollars or properties. It was in the dignity she carried, the strength in her posture, the calm power in her eyes. For years she had been underestimated, mocked and belittled. She had faced betrayal and abandonment, endured nights of tears and heartbreak, and yet, here she was unshaken, unbroken, and untouchable. Every hardship had shaped her, every insult had fueled her, and every quiet struggle had built her into the woman sitting confidently in that courtroom. The world had expected her to crumble, to beg, to fall apart, but instead she had rewritten the story. Her success was quiet but undeniable, her strength invisible to those who didn't see beyond appearances, but crystal clear to anyone who looked closely. Even Jabari, once full of arrogance and laughter, now looked small and helpless. He had thought victory was his for the taking, that her life would fall apart without him. But every moment of mockery he had thrown her way had only strengthened her. Her empire, her wealth, her calm power. All of it was the proof of a truth he could never take away. A woman who rises after betrayal cannot be stopped. Nia's silent victory carried a message stronger than any words. That dignity is priceless, that strength is built in silence, and that rising after being broken is the ultimate triumph. She didn't need to celebrate or gloat. Her presence, her calm, her unwavering poise, spoke to everyone in that room. She had won in ways Jabari could never touch, and the world now saw it, felt it, and would remember it forever. Next, I can continue with part 14, Walking Out in Glow. As the judge banged the gavel, signaling the end of the session, Nia rose slowly, every movement deliberate and filled with quiet power. Her Ankara dress swayed around her like a flowing river of color, her geli perfectly in place, making her look like a queen who had just claimed her throne. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as she walked out, each step confident, steady, and full of grace. There was no rush, no haste. She didn't need to hurry. Everyone around her felt the weight of her presence, the kind of presence that demanded respect without a single word spoken. Photographers rushed forward, cameras flashing, trying to capture her image, but no photo could truly show the depth of what they were witnessing. Here was a woman who had endured betrayal, mockery, and abandonment, yet had risen above it all with strength, elegance, and dignity. Her eyes sparkled not with anger or revenge, but with quiet triumph, the kind that comes from knowing your worth and never letting anyone take it from you. People whispered in awe as she passed, some nodding in admiration, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the magnitude of her success. Even Jabari, standing at the back of the courtroom, watched helplessly as she moved past him. The arrogance that had once filled him was gone, replaced by something smaller: regret, confusion, maybe even fear. He had thought he could humiliate her, but he had only made her rise higher, stronger, and more untouchable. Outside, the sunlight caught her attire, making the colors of her dress and jewelry shine like a crown made of tradition and triumph. Nia walked with her head high, her spirit unshaken, knowing that this moment wasn't just for her. It was a message to every woman who had been underestimated, abandoned, or mocked. She had turned betrayal into a crown, pain into power, and silence into glory. And as she stepped into the world beyond that courtroom, everyone watching knew they were witnessing the rise of a woman who could. Word of Nia's victory spread quickly, first across Adawa, then to towns and cities beyond. People talked about her quietly at first, then loudly, retelling the story of the man who had laughed while signing divorce papers, only to be humbled by the very woman he had dismissed and betrayed. Her name became known not for scandal, but for strength, resilience, and brilliance. Women spoke of her with admiration, seeing in her a reflection of their own struggles and the power they could summon when pushed to the edge. Men shook their heads, reminded that arrogance and betrayal cannot overpower a determined heart. Nia herself continued her life with quiet dignity. She did not seek attention, did not flaunt her wealth, and did not celebrate at Jabari's expense. Instead, she focused on her business, her children, and the life she had built with patience and courage. Every time someone mentioned her story, it reminded her that her triumph was bigger than money or success. It was about reclaiming her life, her pride, and her voice. Her story became a lesson that echoed through communities. Betrayal cannot destroy a woman who refuses to be broken, and determination, patience, and quiet strength can turn pain into power. Nia became a symbol not only of survival, but of victory, proof that a woman underestimated is a force to be reckoned with. And in every retelling, in every whispered conversation, people remembered the truth. Real power is not in mocking or leaving others behind. It is in rising, shining, and turning every wound into a crown. This completes the full 4,000-word viral style script. If you want, I can now compile all 15 parts into a single flowing script with smooth transitions for a ready-to-use version. Do you want me to do that?